Okay, guys. Now my sixth video would be sorry, I got hiccups. Yeah, guys, now I work 4 days again. It's damn about time. What? It's not filling. Okay, let's do Little Sister Jazz of Big Sister. Can I see this? Yeah, I think I did. Let's do the story of little Sandra, strangled, suffered in a suitcase.
You worked hard. Now you're hurt on the job. Your paycheck's expunged and your medical bills are being denied. Do something about it.
Some stories are straight out of hell, and they're even scarier when the murderer is someone you know really well and trust around your children. This was the case of little Sandra Cantu, a young girl who lived in the small community of Tracy, California, some 70 miles south of Sacramento. She was snatched straight off the street and made to endure horrible things. Then her body was dumped in a river. But the culprit was not someone you would expect. She was 28 years old, she was a neighbor and a friend of the Cantu family, and she taught Sunday school at the local church. Her behavior baffled the police, the community, and even herself. Why did Melissa Huckabee commit such a gruesome murder, and what was the trigger behind it? Well, we'll be analyzing the whole story in this video. Let's dive in. On March 8, 2001, a girl was born to a happy family in Tracy, California. Her name was Sandra Renee Cantu, and she lived with her mom, Maria, her grandparents, and her 3 older siblings in a trailer park. Sandra was a very energetic and talkative girl and would start a conversation with pretty much anyone she would come across. Because she lived in a trailer park, she was used to going back and forth to various friends' places there, and her mom knew she could trust the community as there were lots of children there. I used to live in a trailer park too myself.
Yeah, but he was like, yeah, you're trailer trash. Yeah, I am. I'm proud of it.
Melissa's daughter and Sandra were friends. Melissa grew up in La Habra and Brea, where she attended Brea Olinda High School. Then she moved a lot, living for a while in La Palma and then moving to Tracy, to Orchard Estates Trailer Park. Melissa lived there with her daughter and grandparents. Her grandfather was a pastor at the church she taught at and a trusted figure of the mobile home community in Tracy. But her grandfather's kind and giving nature wasn't enough to raise Melissa into a responsible adult. Throughout her life, Melissa was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, bipolar disorder, and schizophrenia. During one of her episodes of psychosis, Melissa would become unaware of what she was doing. Most of the time, she would inflict pain on herself. She had been taking medication to suppress her nasty outbursts, which had been prevalent for all her teenage and adult years. It seemed like the pills were starting to take effect, and Melissa was doing better. However, no one knew that she was hiding a deeper, darker urge inside. What everyone saw was the shy but friendly Sunday school teacher. On Friday, March 27th, 2009, Sandra went to a friend's house after school, then came home to check in. At about 4 p.m., she told her mom she was going to another friend's house to play.
Yeah, 17, 18.
Well, she didn't come home for dinner. She didn't call me. Normally, Sandra wouldn't stay out longer than an hour or two. So at around 7 o'clock, Maria was getting worried. First, she called all Sandra's friends to ask if she was there, but everyone said they hadn't seen her since school hours. Then she searched the trailer park, thinking maybe Sandra got lost around the lot, but she was nowhere to be found. By now, Maria knew she should have called the police earlier, but how was she supposed to know what happened to her daughter at that very time? At 7:53 p.m., the local police got a call about a missing girl in Tracy. The police arrived quickly and proceeded to talk to everyone in the trailer park, but no one knew about Sandra's whereabouts, so the police took to the security camera's footage. On the one closest to Sandra's home, they could clearly see Sandra walking home, then changing direction suddenly. 8 minutes later, a neighbor's SUV passes by. It sounds like this footage was a central piece of the investigation, but it wasn't nearly enough to get a good impression of the kidnapper. In fact, the police spent a long time looking for a male aged between 25 and 40, with a criminal history involving under 18s. Perhaps shockingly, there were quite a lot of men who fit the profile in the neighborhood, and the ruling out process would be a difficult one. And this misdirection didn't just belong to the local police in Tracy, but to the FBI itself, whose help was requested after the local police officers couldn't come to any conclusion on the day of Sandra's disappearance. The FBI brought dogs, equestrian teams, all-terrain vehicles, and a helicopter from the California Highway Patrol to a town of just 80,000 residents. Even professional divers were brought in to search the rivers. However, the waters were really murky and they couldn't see anything. Throughout the weekend of March 28th and 29th, the police did everything in their power to look for Sandra. As the police ran out of options and grew desperate, they went to the media. The security camera footage was shown on TV, and a $22,000 reward was offered for any information on the case. Hundreds of volunteers came to the area to help, and roadblocks were all set up around Tracy. But no matter how much help they got from the public, the police kept getting all the wrong suspects. First, they thought of Sandra's dad, Daniel. Daniel and Maria were going through a difficult divorce. Apparently, they had child support payment issues, and there was constant fighting between them on the topic. The police thought maybe Daniel had kidnapped Sandra to get back at Maria. After a conversation with Daniel, the police ruled him out as a suspect. The next suspect, however, was an older man, in his late 60s at the time, who had been seen kissing Sandra on the lips 2 years before at a local swimming pool. At the time of the incident, Sandra's aunt reported this to the police. But again, the FBI talked to the man, and even though what he had done 2 years back was definitely report-worthy, in this case he was innocent. Apparently, he confessed that he had kissed her, but said it was just harmless affection. The police went on to explain to him that this is very much not harmless affection and that it's actually a criminal offense. The man said that he always had an attraction toward under 18s. Although this was a big red flag for anyone, the police saw no connection between the man and the actual case. They decided to let him go and keep an eye on him for the following weeks. Police were generally hopeful about finding Sandra. The Orchard Estates Trailer Park was known to be a family-friendly, safe place. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children's president, Ernie Allen, even spoke on the news and said, "The good news is, while few people believe it, most come home safely." Ernie was speaking about the 58,000 children who are reported missing every year in the United States. This wasn't the case for Sandra, though. The truth would get much darker. The police proceeded to announce a $5,000 reward for finding Sandra. 230 professional search and rescue volunteers had come from 16 different government entities to help find the girl. They went from house to house and questioned everyone they came across. But the criminal was hiding in plain sight. On the day of the kidnapping, Melissa messaged Maria the following: "Tell the police that I had something stolen today at around 4 p.m. I don't know if that makes a difference or not." In fact, she had reported this stolen object to the police herself. She was talking about her Eddie Bauer suitcase, which was later found containing Sandra's body. And it gets even weirder. The following day, during the vigil for Sandra, Melissa approached the FBI agent, hysterical and hyperventilating, to say she had found a note. It was a torn page from a lined notebook, which read a misspelled message: "Cantu locked in stolen suitcase, thrown in water on Bachetti Road and Whitehill Road. Witness." What was Melissa playing at? Did she want to get caught? Such a message was definitely disturbing to the police officer reading it. Not to say the misspelling seemed off and unlikely. I don't mean, just general bad spelling. I mean like the word on was spelled with 2 N's. Who actually thinks that on is spelled with 2 N's? No matter the
Nobody.
explanation behind this strange note,
Me,
the
I
police were
usually
still
put
far from
O
reaching the truth.
on, that's
They
it.
thought the woman, who visibly suffered from mental issues, had conducted the creepy note just to involve herself in the case and get some attention. In fact, the police questioned Melissa as to where she was at the time Sandra disappeared. Melissa confidently replied that she was at the church where she worked as a teacher, and she was redecorating her classroom. The police didn't think to check the church for evidence. All in all, the police couldn't conceive that a young woman who worked at the church could commit such a horrible crime. That was until April 6th, when a suitcase was found by farm workers during a routine draining of an irrigation pond. Okay, this is gonna sound a little nuts, but the fastest and easiest way to make passive online income on Amazon. Inside the suitcase was the body of a young girl. She was taken to the county morgue and identified that evening as Sandra Cantu. Her family was devastated. Nothing could bring her back, but they still wanted to know the truth behind the crime. Who had done it and why? After the discovery, investigators began taking a closer look at Melissa's strange behavior. FBI Special Agent Michael Conrad testified some months later in the grand jury. It was unusual that a woman who reported losing a suitcase should be the one woman out of everyone in this complex who should happen to find a note that reports that a stolen suitcase was used to hide the child's body. The police finally pieced the two together, and they rushed to Melissa's house with a search warrant. Inside, they found a notebook that read, "Cute, but psycho. Things will even out," on its cover. On its lined pages, the police found notes matching the letters from the note Melissa had handed the police a few days back. Although she had tried disguising her handwriting, she didn't do a very good job. Some of the letters were written exactly the same way in both instances. As if the evidence wasn't enough already, a retired U.S. Marine and his wife reported to the police that they had spotted Melissa and her SUV at the irrigation pond where Sandra's body was discovered. At the time, Melissa had told the man that she had to pee real quick when he saw her. It didn't seem that weird, at least until Sandra's body was recovered from that exact spot. Now the police could finally understand the security camera footage. The SUV that drives in the opposite direction that Sandra was walking just a few minutes before was indeed Melissa's. Another surveillance camera shows Melissa's SUV driving away from the church about an hour and a half later. When the police got to Melissa's house, they found all the evidence they needed, but they didn't find her. She was in the hospital after she had attempted to take her own life. There was only one thing left to do: get to the hospital and arrest her. However, before the police got there, the hospital discharged her. But even though it seemed like Marissa tried to take her own life to avoid the consequences of her actions, soon after the discharge, she went to the police on her own accord. She gave a sort of roundabout false confession where Sandra and her daughter were playing hide and seek and there was an accident. This would be one of the many decisions Melissa made that baffled police officers and people following the case. It would also be the beginning of a long and painful process of finding out all the gory details of the horrible crime. On that fateful afternoon, Sandra had actually gone to her friend's house, only to find out her friend wasn't home. As she was returning home, Melissa invited her into her car and convinced her to come to church with her, the church where Sandra would see Melissa every weekend. She probably knew the church inside and out and knew when and where there would be no one to notice them. Even though she was suffering a psychotic episode at the time, Melissa was cold and calculated enough to avoid drawing attention to herself. Melissa poisoned the girl with alprazolam, which was hidden in a drink she gave her. Alprazolam is a powerful drug used to treat anxiety. Once she was knocked out, she assaulted her with a rolling pin and strangled her with a noose made out of old clothing. It's unknown whether Sandra had the strength to scream for help and no one heard her, or if she was too knocked out to do so.
Anxiety, that's what I had.
No one could hear what was going on.
I had like anxiety, stress, and nervous anxiety.
She had already reported stolen, drove to the irrigation pond, tossed the suitcase, lied to the retired U.S. Marine, and drove back to church. On April 9th, FBI agents searched the church, and in the kitchen, they found a rolling pin with a bloody smudge on it. Tested positive for Sandra's DNA. And at Melissa's home and in her purse, there were many bottles of alprazolam. Even worse, it seemed like the murder was premeditated.
That's what's it called.
Melissa's internet search history and found an article about a man who had hidden his granddaughter's body in a suitcase. The next day, Melissa was arrested and charged with the murder of Cantu. But the suffering of Sandra's family was far from over. He took the life of an innocent little girl. She wasn't even old enough to decide to eat ice cream yet. Melissa couldn't decide on what to tell police when she was arrested. The first time she was questioned, she said that Sandra and her daughter were playing a game of hide and seek when Sandra hid in the suitcase, which was in Melissa's home. Melissa supposedly forgot that there was a child in the suitcase and she locked it. Then, Sandra suffocated. When Melissa discovered her, it was too late, so she panicked and decided to dump her in the irrigation pond. However, the way the body was stuffed in the suitcase made it clear to the police that there was no way Sandra could have crawled in there willingly. Melissa's story would change a few more times before she would disappear to the public. Initially, Judge Linda Loftus issued a gag order, preventing lawyers and any parties involved in the case from commenting publicly. This was to hide some of the gruesome details about Sandra's death. But this decision protected not only Sandra's family, but Melissa too, from being charged with what she deserved. Shortly after Sandra's body was discovered, Melissa tried taking her own life by swallowing 3 blades. This was when her ex-husband filed for custody of their daughter. The trial for Melissa Huckabee was long and filled with withholding information. On April 14th, Melissa had her first court appearance. She appeared with marks on her forehead, which she had inflicted on herself that morning. She was charged with taking, violating, and killing Sandra. She cried throughout her whole appearance. On June 12th, Melissa held her plea, during which she tearfully apologized to Sandra's family.
I love Sandra a great deal. She was sweet and innocent little girl and did not deserve to have such a short life. I know I'm responsible for Sandra's death.
Something still wasn't right. Although Melissa admitted to killing Sandra, she denied molesting her beforehand.
I should not have taken Sandra from you to know that she did not suffer, and I did not.
Melissa went on to say she cannot understand why she did what she did, and that this is a question she will struggle with for the rest of her life. This plea was a part of the deal that removed the possibility of Melissa getting the death penalty. Because she only admitted to the special circumstance of murder during the course of a kidnapping, the penalty could only be life without parole. Although probably anyone would choose life in prison over the death sentence, Melissa didn't seem to want to live. Her self-harm episodes would be more and more frequent and more violent. On August 12th, a deputy saw Melissa sitting next to her bed with a trash can. He asked her what was wrong, and she simply told him, "I took pills." Then she got dizzy and passed out. She was immediately taken by ambulance for treatment, and they removed from her system a number of pills large enough to take her life. On August 17th, she was found hiding behind the mattress in her cell with a blanket tied around her neck. Following the incident, she was kept under strict surveillance in jail without bail. She refused to eat and did all she could to avoid her court hearings, but the district attorney had asked the judge to order Melissa to attend all her court hearings. During the summer of 2009, many people came forth with further evidence convicting Melissa. First, there was evidence of Melissa drugging 2 other people with anti-anxiety drugs. Laura Polk, a mother who lived in the same trailer park, described an incident which she had reported to the police in January that year. Her daughter returned home one day in a very grim state. The girl's 18-year-old sister described this to ABC News. Her speech was slurred, like she had a really bad lisp, and she would cry a lot, like something was wrong with her. She couldn't stand up without help. She couldn't walk. Every time she tried to walk, she would fall. Extremely worried, the mother and older daughter took the little girl to the hospital. The doctors tested the girl's blood and saw that she had strong muscle relaxants in her system. Her older sister told the news that the death of Sandra might not have happened if the detectives had taken her sister's case more seriously at the time. And she might be right. There was another case involving Melissa, which the police didn't look hard enough into. On March 3rd, the same year, Melissa gave an unspecified type of medicine to a Hayward man named Daniel Plowman. The same day, the man was arrested for driving under the influence. However, he was never charged. He had been drugged without his knowledge the same way Melissa drugged her 2 other victims, by hiding alprazolam in food or drinks. And the accusations were not over yet. Melissa was a person of interest regarding 2 arson fires that were set 8 days apart in La Palma, where she lived in 2007. Unfortunately, the Tracy Police Department told La Palma police officers to maintain the gag order and to keep quiet about whatever Melissa had done in the past. La Palma police informed Tracy police officers about Melissa's files secretly, and details are still not known to the public.
I've been getting paid $1,000 a month, if not more, just from this app on my phone. And
By August 2009, Sandra's autopsy results, along with the other accounts of drugging and endangering children, were enough to indict Melissa on charges relating to what happened to Sandra Cantu. The court also canceled the request from Melissa's lawyers to exhume Sandra's body for a second autopsy. Public defender Peter Fox told the San Francisco Chronicle, "The relevant samples were preserved. It will not be necessary to disturb the child's remains. From a human point of view, certainly, it's nice to not have to do that." However, even with all the clear evidence added to the case, Melissa's sentence remained life in prison without parole, as she pleaded guilty to murder and kidnapping with enhancements. In June 2010, more than a year after Sandra's death, the judge lifted the gag order off the case and allowed all the grisly details of the crime to be known to the wide public. Several media outlets had petitioned to have the details released, be it from desire for justice or morbid curiosity. Sandra Cantu's case, now known in all its gore, horrified the California community and many other Americans who read the news. Everyone was at a loss as to why a Sunday school teacher went on to do such heinous crimes against a girl who was her own daughter's friend. In the aftermath of the gag order lift, thousands of pages of previously sealed documents were released. Now, authorities and psychologists could analyze these and suggest theories for Melissa's behavior and motive. The motive that psychologists agreed on was, in short, an attempt to attract attention to herself. So what is the longer explanation behind this? This type of behavior has a name: Munchausen by proxy syndrome. It is an unfortunately frequent form of child abuse, where a person harms somebody else for attention. In fact, it's possible that Melissa's first victim was her own daughter, who had a history of being sick and in the hospital pretty much all the time. Deputy District Attorney Thomas Tesla spoke about Melissa's history of mental health issues linking to the 2009 murder. There were 20 or so times that Melissa caught herself, set fires, or verbally or psychologically attacked someone else, such as a roommate. And there was something like that going on here, after the murder, where she wanted to be the center of attention. Knowing this, all her strange clues with the police calls and the note start making sense. Let's rewind. First, she calls the police to tell them that she has lost her suitcase, describing it in detail, including its brand and color. Then she texts Sandra's mom, attracting further attention to her lost suitcase. Finally, she handed the police a note she herself had written, with the location of the body. I wonder if she wanted to be the one who solved the case by finding the note. Indeed, the police have wondered about Melissa's motive long after the arrest. The Tracy Police Department denied mishandling the case, but did admit that they thought there was no way a woman was capable of doing such things. This was the main reason the investigation lasted so long, when the evidence was literally in front of their eyes. Is there a lesson we should draw from this story? Well, exercise caution around your neighbors, especially if you have kids. It's a strange world out there, and people with severe mental issues rarely even know they have them. And if they do, they don't always control them. This is the end of today's video. What do you think of this case? Should Melissa have gotten the death penalty? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section. And if you'd like more blood-chilling stories delivered straight to your feed, don't forget.
Okay, guys. I will see you in my last video, so I see you then.